Hi, my name is Carly. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I recently graduated in March of 2023 from the Northwestern program, and I currently work as a prenatal genetic.
Hello, my name is Ellery, and I use she, her pronouns. I graduated just this year in May from the University of Minnesota's program.
My name is Will Whistler. I took the exam in August of 2023, and I also graduated the same year from a genetic counseling program. I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, my name is Ashley Thompson, and my pronouns are she, her. I graduated from Bay Path University's genetic counseling program in May 2023. So by watching this video, I want to first say, congratulations, you are taking steps to prepare yourself and set yourself up for success for this board examination. Whether you're taking it in this upcoming board exam cycle or you're taking it in the following exam cycle, you're taking the right steps to get yourself prepared, familiarize yourself with resources, and move in the right direction towards preparing for the board exam. And I think that's the first bit of advice that I'd like to impart is be gentle with yourself and recognize that any step in the forward direction in preparing for and studying for your board examination is the right direction.
My study plan was really focused around how I best learn. For me, what was most important was to spend a lot of time just organizing all of the information. What that meant is for the first 2 months or so, maybe 2.5 months, all I was doing was synthesizing information, watching videos, listening to lectures, going through PowerPoints from my time in school, and putting all that information into easy to read and access notes, easy fact sheets about different conditions, and also putting together my flashcard deck. I found that taking the time just to create all of my study materials was really helpful when it got time to really hunker down and start trying to memorize things. But it also helped me learn a lot along the way. So when I got to the studying part of everything, going through flashcards, taking practice exams, which was really my last 2 months, month and a half of studying, I felt like I had known a lot more than I had when I started because I had been so dedicated and took all of that time to really focus and take in the information without trying to memorize it all at once.
My biggest overall recommendation is to organize yourself and start early. I gave myself more time than people typically talk about just because I knew that I needed more time to process information. So know yourself as a learner and how much time you need, but start early with organizing the information that you got during grad school and putting it into kind of categories of things that are easy to break down.
For my study guide, the kind of way I went about studying, I set calendar dates and I went week by week and day by day often and just wrote down what I was going to study for that day. I think having firm deadlines is a really good way to kind of keep yourself on track. Otherwise, it can feel very overwhelming.
I took the board exam for the first time in August of 2023, and my biggest tip for exam takers is make a schedule and stick to it. Studying for the board exam is a marathon, not a sprint, and as you prepare to study for an exam for several months on end, it's really helpful to have something to look back on, some kind of outline, some kind of organization to figure out not only where to start, but also where should you be at certain points. I think it's really helpful to have checkpoints here and there along the way to make sure that you're staying on track and making sure that you're going to get through everything that you want to get through before your exam day.
Study tools that I have is this right here, the Genetic Counseling Complete Study Guide Bundle by GC Genius. You can find this on Etsy. I know that this individual has put out a study guide as well as other 100 conditions you should know flashcards, but I found this study guide to be particularly helpful. It's full with different infographics and bullet points and really everything you should know across all the specialties, in addition to including specific pearls or items that make conditions different and stand out in your memory that will be incredibly helpful for you in studying for your board exam.
I also used a variety of different study methods. So I used flashcards, both physical and virtual, because there's just like so much information and sometimes it's easier to make them on Quizlet. So I used flashcards a lot. The other thing I would say is if you aren't working in a position as a genetic counselor, it could be helpful to talk with a genetic counselor who's in clinic about their experience with insurance, and just have them kind of talk about like, what do they do to place an order for a test, and what types of things do they need to consider when they're deciding about what type of test to order. And usually they'll probably talk about CPT codes and ICD-10 codes and calling insurance about, deductibles and kind of all those like key critical terminology. So just like have a conversation with someone that's working with insurance pretty regularly, and a lot of those simple definitions will come to you pretty quickly.
Other tip is to really rely on your friends, your classmates, and your coworkers, especially the people that are going to be taking the exam at the same time as you. You can use these resources not only for emotional support, which is going to be super important, but a lot of times other people might have different resources, different ways of thinking about things, and different ways of remembering certain topics and certain conditions. For myself, I found it was really, really helpful to explain certain topics to my friends as we were studying together. I remembered those topics much more easily when I was taking the exam because I could remember what I had told my friends. And likewise, the topics that my friends told me about not only saved me time and lots of Google searches, but also helped me remember things a lot more effectively than I think I would have if I had studied everything on my own. I also got a lot of great resources from friends in different programs that were different than my own, taught things in a different way. Maybe they provided different instructions, different PowerPoints, different lectures, and I really appreciated that I got to hear from different perspectives and think about different ways to kind of work through all of this information and different ways to work through some of these topics.
I found that the ETSI genetic counseling kind of study guide was the most useful tool in providing a really good general overall picture of what could even be tested on. Definitely not comprehensive, but I think a really good resource to just say, hey, this is, the real focus of the exam is on these topics. It was a good kind of resource to focus on. I had hundreds and hundreds of flashcards. Those were helpful for me, kind of the memorization phase as well.
I was really overwhelmed from the beginning on the number of conditions that are available in this book and the number of conditions we study in grad school, and not having their clinical features or presentations overlap in my head. And so I think a place where I found helpful to begin was studying the 100 conditions every genetic counselor list should know. And that's published by CORF, and you can find other editions of that as well. And so I started there. I made an Excel sheet, and then that Excel sheet kept me organized with all of these 100 conditions. And I made flashcards based on their category. I separated these flashcards. I color-coded them according to pediatric. Was this condition a condition that presented during the pediatric years? Was it a condition that presented mostly as an adult onset condition? Was it a metabolic condition? Was it a cancer predisposition syndrome? Or was it a chromosome abnormality, such as an aneuploidy, microdeletion, microduplication? So those are the 5 different categories that I split my note cards up into and color coordinated them. And I kept that spreadsheet. And so these are the top 100 conditions that every GC should know. And I just I cross-referenced my list or the conditions and outlines from the genetic counseling study bundle from GC Genius, along with looking at the core fact sheets and gene reviews. So I really tried to cross-reference all of those to see what were the pearls of these conditions and what really made these conditions distinct, and what was something I could really remember about these conditions that would make it stand out. Another recommendation that many people often get is to study from the Green Book. I found this to be helpful when I read the chapters that were more focused on psychosocial implications.
I also used gene reviews. Everyone will say you should use it, and it's absolutely true. Gene reviews is going to have anything you can imagine about a condition. I think its biggest strength is actually the testing strategy information, particularly for conditions where genetic testing is not the first step. Gene reviews is going to have everything you need, from clinical features to evaluations after a diagnosis, testing strategy, and everything in between. I would also recommend looking at Quizlet. Quizlet is full of amazing study sets from people that have put them together as they were studying themselves. I find that Quizlet has some very concise study sets and also huge, massive 1,000-question study sets that honestly for me worked better than most of the practice exams out there. That's because these questions were written by real people taking the actual exam, and I found that because they were written by genetic counselors, they made a lot of sense for how the exam was actually written once I ended up taking it.
Even though all the practice questions that I encountered were based off of the old content outline, I still felt like so much of it was still applicable when I took the test. Getting used to the way that they ask questions and the kind of types of questions. For example, there was like a recurring theme of questions about referrals. So who is the best referral for this person based on their set of symptoms? And that was a really strange way for me to think through something. I hadn't really considered that before. But as I did more of those types of practice questions, it became more comfortable and routine.
With regards to some of the test content in this updated test version, there were insurance and research questions that I honestly knew from my clinical rotation. So I would say that our programs are still catching up in terms of their content and preparing students for the board exam. So really lean into your understanding of insurance from your clinical rotations, and don't be scared to ask other examinees, what their experience was.
The new board exam content definitely felt different. A lot of cardio questions, those insurance policy questions. I think not getting, the new questions usually aren't scored. So a tip I can give is don't get freaked out when those questions pop up and you haven't studied for them.
In terms of kind of the new content, I would say that I felt like it was a noticeable difference. Granted, I hadn't taken the previous exam, so I didn't really have much to compare to except for the practice. And I did think that it was different than that, and I could sense that there were more questions about reimbursement and insurance and policy and genetic counselors having various different non-clinical roles, as well as I felt like there was a heavier emphasis on the ethics component. And so for me, the Green Book was actually helpful for that. I know people talk about that book a lot, and I didn't really know if I should read it cover to cover or just skim it. And I just went through the content outline and then looked for chapters that mapped onto those concepts and read those in detail. So I do recommend that, especially the later chapters in the book that talk about other roles for genetic counselors, like genetic counselors as educators or as advocates and policy makers. Those types of things I think were really helpful to review in the Green Book, and then were directly applicable to the exam itself.
I took my test remote with a live remote proctor, and I will not be shy here. I was one of the examinees that did experience quite a bit of IT difficulties. I know that ABGC has taken some steps to ensure that's resolved for future examinees with providing a new test proctoring service. So I hope you don't experience any of the same difficulties, but I will say make sure you test your system the day before and sign on as soon as you can so that you have access to IT as early as possible in your testing process in case you come across any difficulties in testing. If there are those difficulties and you're not able to get your test pulled up, remain calm and know that this has happened to others before, and that ABGC will work with you to get your test rescheduled. Reach out to them and be persistent in advocating for yourself, but know that sometimes some of those difficulties can happen, and just remain calm. I know you've prepared for this for months and it's incredibly frustrating. I was very frustrated, but that you're not alone and often in having these technical difficulties. But I will say that taking the test in an environment that was comfortable for me and known to me, and with noises around me that I knew and were familiar with, was incredibly helpful for me in preventing test anxiety.
And then in terms of the tech issues, I did have a tech issue. My exam wouldn't open for the first hour, and they were pretty helpful, I feel like, compared to other experiences that I've heard from people, in that the proctor called ABGC directly and got kind of a unique URL for me to take it. So I feel lucky in that sense. So I can't speak to what to do if it doesn't go as smoothly at resolving that, I guess, but I think it was really a lot of self-talk and working through that anxiety of trusting, like, I will get access to the exam.
So going into the exam, kind of keeping in the back of your mind that perhaps tech issues could happen is kind of a good preemptive mindset to have.
Do math problems, practice math problems, and really get those down, and know when to recognize a math problem and how to complete it, because those are free points. If you understand how to do the math problem, that's something you can know and get done without knowing a lot of the genetics behind it. So do a lot of practice math problems, Bayes and Hardy-Weinberg, and I think that will benefit you greatly in your test preparation as well.
I know a lot of us now type all of our study guides and materials, but really just taking the information that I got in grad school and synthesizing it through my own handwriting was a way to review everything and to really ingrain it.
My biggest ones is just being truthful and honest with yourself, how much time you have to study. I think there's a lot of different approaches that people take to studying for the board's exam. But if you're working a new job, if you just moved to a new city, if you don't have a job, if you have a lot of other external factors going on, just when you're kind of formulating a study guide or setting a schedule to study, being truthful for yourself, how much mental energy and time you have can save you a lot of strife down the line.
The last thing that I want to mention is that you're going to hear lots of tips from lots of people, whether that's from your classmates or your new coworkers. Everybody studies for the exam in a different way. I would really encourage you to think about your strengths and your weaknesses, and especially how your brain works and how you study best. You should always use the resources that you get or the resources that you find as a starting point. Add to what you get. Make sure that what you're doing is most effective for you. That might not be the same for your classmates, that might not be the same for your friends, but it's really important that you focus on how are you going to get this information into your head. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of studying, and it's a really, really long time to be constantly learning, taking in information, and a lot of times doing work outside of work. That can be really, really, really tough. So while you're making sure that you're maximizing your time that's as effective as it is for you, make sure that if you are struggling, if you're having a hard time getting through those months, talk to your friends, talk to your family, or whoever your support system is to make sure that they know what you need and figure out how you're going to best take care of yourself. Best of luck on your board exam in this upcoming year. I hope that it goes well. I hope that there are no technical issues, fingers crossed, and I'm wishing you all the best.
Remember, every step in the forward direction towards studying for your board exam and preparing is a step in the right direction. And I'm grateful you're here watching this video, and I wish you all the best in taking your board exam, whether it's this cycle or the next. And I look forward to you joining me in the ranks as a genetic counselor. Take care.